Hello, hello. Welcome to another great episode of All In Person podcast by Xtag. Today I have a very special guest that I know for over 4 years and we worked together in the past. Her name is Chelsea Freeborn, a very experienced event planner that I'm so happy to have here with me today. Chelsea, how are you?
I'm super good. Thank you so much for including me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you very much for joining. So, before we dive into my crazy questions for you, please tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey, anything you'd like to share.
Yeah, I've been in events for on and off about 15 years. I started very young, and I've been able to go global, which is really amazing. It helped expand companies and event structures and management in the United States, LATAM, EMEA, APAC, and right now I'm currently looking at going into a new position with a really exciting company. Some more to come there, but yeah, it's been a really fun, exciting journey, and I've met amazing people along the way. So.
Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, we are very, very happy that you are here with us and that we had the opportunity to work together in the past. So let's dive into the questions. The first one for you, because you're very experienced and you've been all over the world basically with events and you've seen a lot. So if you can pick one event that you'll never forget, what was it and why you still stick with it?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's actually one I get asked a lot behind the scenes, especially when bringing my company on to help companies scale and their event structures and marketing structures. I think it's probably going to be this event in Korea that I did, actually with the same company that I met you with when I was working with Avalanche. We were doing our global expansion into the Korea market or Asian market, and had a beautiful event set up. Everything was going swimmingly, working with amazing partners, and our venue sunk. And we had to make a decision in less than 48 hours to either cancel the event, move the event. And from that event, actually, I learned how imperative partnership is, which me and you were speaking about a little bit before we started recording, and was really able to leverage in a strategic but also extremely helpful manner one of our partnerships that ended up allowing our event to succeed, it being one of our most pinnacle events, and just kind of created a whole different experience that we could have never thought of. And so that really showed me that you always need to plan A, B, C, and D, and possibly E, but also who you know in the industry, how well connected you are, how much you nurture partnerships is really going to change the trajectory of what you're creating. So,
That's insane, first of all. And also having this experience abroad. Like in the US, it's way easier for all of us. You know, we're here, boots on the ground. We know a lot of people, which is a key. But in Korea, oh my God, insane. And I couldn't agree more about the connections. Like being able to have people in your list that you feel comfortable to call them, and you know that if you need them, they are there, and you know who
mhm,
to call for what, right? I think this is
exactly.
one of the great skills of good event planners and
Yeah.
experienced ones. Cool. Thank you. A lot of more questions to come. And the next one for you is um, besides of what you just said about connections and good partners and all that. So a lesson that you learned the hard way that can help another maybe less experienced or new event planners that you can share with us.
I think I learned this one early in my career. I had phenomenal mentors. So, anybody looking to get into the space, I highly recommend getting a mentor, like a business mentor, an emotional support mentor, maybe a therapist. But just getting a variety of people that can kind of guide you and talk to you is, I think, probably one of the biggest ways that I was ever able to move through really a lot of hardship. A lot of hardship happens in events, but I think the biggest piece I learned is that nobody knows, right? So like expectations are like set and presented, and you have your kind of your goals, or depending how you're showing up for events, like what the vision is, but really nobody actually knows what's going to happen to the day of. So these like minuscule things, like I'm a huge attention to detail person, but people don't necessarily notice as much as like events people do, of like what's kind of going wrong, what's not like working, unless it's extremely obvious. So that intense pressure that I see a lot of event individuals have doesn't have to be so tight, and that you can really like kind of pull back and have a bird's eye view and just know that everything is going to work out, especially if you do your pre-production. And I think that is probably one of the biggest keys I like to leave with my team members, especially as they're scaling into like higher positions, moving from like production assistant to production coordinator, is like have your eye on the detail, but have a bird's eye view and know that like nobody knows what's actually going to happen. And it creates this space that takes a lot of the stress and internal pressure off that I've noticed. Especially that's what I learned early in my career. I made so many mistakes and would like sit and obsess about them. And my mentor, such an amazing, generous woman, her name's Allison Storr, like she's still to this day someone very important in my life, just told me like nobody knows. I know, but like nobody else knows. And it was just such a sigh of relief. And so I think having a mentor and just being really kind with yourself is really important. So
I agree. It's like being also kind of a little bit kind with yourself, right? Like expect from
mhm.
yourself realistic things and understand where you stand and that things can go wrong and no one is perfect and all that. So, yeah, I think it's a great insight for the younger generation. Thank you for that. And
Yeah.
moving forward, follow up to that. Basically, you talked about the way that what might go wrong and all that, and I think that one of the great skills I see more in more experienced planners versus the new or junior, let's say, planners, is how they kind of see the red flags ahead of time of something that might go wrong. So if you can tell us top three, top five, whatever signs that you see ahead of time that another junior one would say, okay, it's fine, but you're like, no, 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 stop right here. Let's make sure we fix that. So any three kind of red flags you see before the event starts?
Yeah, three red flags. I feel like everyone should have a tarot card reader and a psychic in their back pocket, but that's, doesn't necessarily solve everything. I think the biggest one, honestly, for me is like my intuition. And like, intuition's a really broad word, right? And like, it's like this sapo spiritual kind of thing everyone hears about. And it really does show up in this work, and I've seen it with not only myself but like with my peers or bosses or shareholders. And you'll get a signal, right? And it will kind of be this like left questioning signal. Like I had it when we had an instance where me and you first met, and there was some stuff that went on with a certain company, and the company left me just very curious and like not in a good way. And I was actually very much not like aligning with them. And I was just thinking, I just had thought something different, and it ended up coming to fruition. And so what I've noticed and longer is I really trust my intuition. For instance, I just wrapped a really big project right before Christmas, right after Christmas. And I had this intuition about something, and I just was like, this is not going to work. I didn't want to let people down. I didn't want to, do this, but the reason I could feel that was like, one, if I can't really see it fully, if it's like super foggy and I'm having to ask for redundant amounts of like questions or proof, usually that means something needs to be tweaked and moved. Also, just within like the context of people, I think people are amazing, but there's also this limited understanding of capacity. So when anyone is taking on way too much, it needs to be looked at that, right? And also, if people are asking for support, that's usually a really good sign that A, they need more support, or the scale of what you're creating and or putting into the frequency for these people to work on needs to maybe be pulled back a little bit or readjusted. Because I think a lot of people want to create amazing big things, but you have to look at time, you have to look at budget, and you have to be very realistic in that capacity. And that takes also a little bit of intuition. And then another really big red flag for me, just overall in events, when something is not going to work, is when there's a safety issue. I used to be very risky, and like, would do risky things for like the show or for whatever we were creating. And at some point, I kind of in my career had a little bit of a pivot where I realized like if the risk really outweighs the reward, if it's like, you know, um, fire or, a specific type of show that you want to do, like it's sometimes maybe a little bit better to pivot because the risk isn't usually worth it. And I've seen that just literally firsthand in my own experiences. And I think that's something really important to listen to. But I think number one overall is your intuition. And what intuition sounds like to me is this like do I see this, can I feel this, and does it like sound right? And if I keep having to get those proven to myself, that usually means something's not aligning with my intuition. So that's my long-winded answer.
No, it's a great answer, and I think that actually you pretty surprised me with things that I didn't even think of. Like I'm not an event planner. I always learn from event planners like you, and as a vendor, it's very good for me to kind of understand what concerns you. And I think we can just cut what you said right now, like this recording, this piece of recording for this answer. And when people underestimate the planner's job or the role in the event, they can just listen to these 2 minutes that you talked about that and understand right away why a good experienced event planner is so important and why it's such a hard job to do, that not just anyone can just go and be an event planner. So thank you for
Of
that.
course.
Good, moving forward. um, I'd like to talk a little bit about the experience of the attendees. Okay. Also, something that I see differences between junior planners and experienced planners. What are things that a lot of planners, according to your experience, will underestimate, but actually they are so important for the attendee experience, and they shouldn't just let it go, and they should kind of focus on that.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. Funny enough, my a few of my mentors in the space always told me people remember two things. And it's so cliche, you hear it all the time. What the food tasted like and how you made them feel, right? And so those are really important. Now, how you make them feel can be very broad, but that's like from your first touch, depending on how the experience is created. But like when people are greeted upon arrival, super like that first impact is so important. People remember that forever. It's like when you're greeted going into like a nice store, you never forget when the woman was like, "Hi, nice to see you. Let me know if you need any help." It makes you feel really comfortable. Same exact thing in experiences. Additionally, food, a lot of people will try and cut corners. I have cut corners in my career. Unless you're wanting, and by the way, like side note, like disgust is like one of the number one imprints of any sensation and feeling for marketing. So we get more out of disgust than we actually do from feeling good, which is like a whole, psychology, like the psychology of event structure, which I'm not recommending to anybody. But you don't necessarily want that component to still happen because you can have a better experience as well with like food and feeling. And so just as a means, like people will remember your event as well by what they're disgusted. But also just another key element into the feeling is we're sense driven. So I took a really amazing events marketing psychology course. I'm huge on psychology, and it showed that the senses, the most impacted is actually smell. So it will literally re-trigger you to a memory. And I think that's one that, like, sometimes in events we don't necessarily realize that smell is so important and triggers the senses in your brain that connect so much. And so when you go into a hotel, you always remember the smell and you always remember those hotels. That's what they do. So like food, feeling, and scent, I think is probably one of the most pinnacle pieces. You can completely change a dynamic, even if you don't have a large budget. And that could just be like scaling from like, past apps to a grazing buffet table that's a little bit smaller, but it's like looks in abundance and just kind of these tweaks and turns. So that's what I would recommend. Yeah.
Another great insight that I didn't think of. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. Before we go to the challenge, the 60-second challenge, I have last one questions for the vendors, like trying to touch different elements of the events, and now talking one question for the vendors. So what is one thing you can mention, or more than that, if you'd like, that when you speak to a vendor, it makes you to trust them? What are you looking at a vendor, just to trying to help my peers in the industry, how they can make you trust them?
Yeah, trust is a really funny thing. To be forward, I'm a very direct like mediary when I'm talking to vendors. So like I really don't like a lot of fluff. I just like how much is this going to cost, why is this going to cost, and what we're going to do and create. And I also really value honesty. There's a difference between truth and honesty. That's like a whole sales component you can look into and stuff. But I really value when people are truthful with me and are like this may not be possible because, but we can try. And that just sets a tone for me. I work very well with directness, a lot of clarity that's very simplified. And I think for both a vendor and someone that's hiring a vendor, you want to have it not necessarily be transactional, but very clear, right? Like extremely clear, and accountability. Like that's huge for me, especially if there's like a mistake. And I'm super customer service driven, so like if I something goes on with my client and I'm managing a budget, I will take that responsibility if something doesn't go right. And I like to see that also with a lot of vendors. That's how I'll continuously repeat work with vendors, even if I'm not going to, something doesn't go right and like they offer a discount, I'll usually end up paying the full amount. But like just the level of accountability is so important for me. And so I think those kind of change the whole dynamic for me. Is just clarity, clearness, directness, honesty, and then accountability is really huge.
Amazing. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chelsea, very much for that. And
Yeah.
are you ready for the challenge?
Yeah.
Okay. So, with the challenge, just to remind everyone, we have 1 minute. And within this 1 minute, I'm asking very direct questions. And I expect very short answers. Okay.
Great.
We have 1 minute. We have enough questions to cover more than that, but we'll do as much as we have time, like 1 minute strict. Ready?
Yes.
Okay, one, two, three. Okay, one thing you always over prepare for.
Impatient.
All right. One vendor red flag in the first 5 minutes of a call.
Overly salesy.
Okay. One small detail that makes an event feel premium.
Scent.
Cool. What else we have here? One thing attendees hate but rarely say out loud.
Unstructured small talk.
We have like 10 seconds. What do you mean by that?
Meaning you just put people in a room and they don't really know each other and they don't have any directive of what to communicate about.
Like that. Cool. Last one. We have about 10 seconds. Your must have emergency item on site.
Water and Celsius.
Amazing. Right. Okay. So we are on time and let's hear the beep beep. Cool. Very good. Very, very good. Chelsea,
Oh,
I can't
Sababa.
thank you enough. It was so nice to reconnect, talk
Yeah.
before we recorded, and of course in the recording. And I hope that we'll keep in touch. You are an amazing event planner. We had a great experience
Thank you.
together in the past. And anyone that is looking for a planner, I can just can't recommend more working with Chelsea. You just saw what she is saying here. I don't need to speak more. I don't need to sell you. You're just doing your job amazingly well. So thank you. I wish you an amazing 2026.
Same.
Full of great events, a lot of peak events, a lot of peak moments, and as less stressful as possible.
Thank you. Same to you. And I look forward to working together in 2026.
Sounds good. Bye, everyone.